Hello, ladies and gentlemen. It's a Ukrainian talk show on Pod TV. My name is Sasha Star, and today's guest is, of course, Dr. Jonathan Lockwood. Welcome to the show, Jonathan.
Thank you, Sasha. Glad to be here as always, especially today.
Yeah, today is a very special day. Unfortunately, Ivan will join us only on Friday. Uh,
Oh, that's too bad.
they have some probably election parties in Kiev, and I'm not sure what they're celebrating. I've been invited to three different celebration parties in case of Kamala Harris wins, and four parties, similar parties celebration if Donald Trump wins. So
Wow,
unfortunately, I will not be able to attend all seven, but this,
you're not a totally bipartisan guy, and you're not an energetic social butterfly or a bipartisan one who can attend to afford all seven, because you would be attending a very sad party in one case and another sad group of sad parties in case the other person wins. Sheesh. Well,
it's a very interesting election, and
oh yes,
I think what's interesting here is that it's not so much that both sides are all in for their respective candidates. I think that the people who will vote for Trump, they will primarily do it because they just hate Democrats and Kamala Harris and all that stuff. So
they think the alternative is absolutely unacceptable.
absolutely. So the Trump with all his impeachments and all those lawsuits and everything else, it's
They regard
still
that
a
they
better deal than Democrats. I have against Democrats only one real thing, but it's really important, is their policy, which is, you know what, it's kind of a hidden. But when you look at what's happened in schools and universities, and it's all a result of the democratic the doctrines and so on, it's a nerve-wracking. It's absolutely paralyzes everything, and this is probably worse than even Trump will have six impeachment or 25 impeachments and and another 250 lawsuits.
it doesn't matter because they're simply doing it out of spite, not out of any real evidence of a criminal conviction that is genuinely worthy of impeachment. They will the Democrats will impeach Trump if they win for the same reason that a dog licks its genitals, because they can.
Yeah. Well, I agree with you that if somehow Democrats will win, I think I wouldn't bet that Trump will avoid a jailhouse. I really
It
wouldn't.
would be very, very difficult, yes, because they will just keep after him because they're practicing the politics. Essentially, for them, they are practicing the politics of vengeance, which is rather unseemly. I mean, you saw flashes of this sort of thing in earlier periods of American history. If you want to look at a really vicious presidential election, look at the election of 1864 during the American Civil War, when Lincoln was running as the Republican candidate and his former general of the Union Army, McClellan, was running against him as the Democratic candidate. And there were two other smaller candidates, and Lincoln just barely managed to win. But the Confederacy was counting on McClellan winning that election in order to force a peace with the Confederacy. I mean, that was their last hope after Gettysburg. So there have been very, very consequent. This election probably as consequential as the 1864 election, but for different reasons, because it signals a very important change of direction that the United States will go, depending on who wins. One of the polls suggested that only 27% of the American population believes that the United States is going in the right direction. That statistic would weigh very heavily in favor of a potential Trump victory. And because Trump represents change from the way things are going now, and Kamala Harris essentially represents more of the same. If you can boil it down that way and look at it from that perspective. So, but the impact of the election on the war in Ukraine, That is also very interesting. I noted with great interest the article that you sent me recently from Kirichenko
Yeah,
about
very
the
impressive.
strategic significance of Crimea and the importance of the Ukrainians having essentially neutralized Russian control of the Black Sea, and the potential if the Ukrainians should gain control over Crimea, as I've been advocating on this program numerous times, if they succeed in doing that, Crimea is the true center of gravity of this war. And if the Ukrainians cut off Crimea from Russian reinforcement and resupply and force the surrender of Russian occupation forces in Crimea, then this will not only enable the Ukrainians to increase their grain exports, which is very good for their economy, seal off Russian influence in the Black Sea, and potentially they could invite NATO forces, NATO naval forces, into the Black Sea itself, which
With agreements with Turkey.
with Turkey, right? If they get an agreement with Turkey there, and that would provide the most favorable situation for the Ukrainians to force the Russians out of Ukraine altogether.
And
And
maybe
this-
even to Georgia, because
Yes.
Georgia is also affected.
Yes,
by
and so this is the current election, today's election, is pivotal in a number of respects. It will have multiple effects on multiple theaters. It will have an effect on what Israel does, because, for example, if Ms. Harris wins, that will signal less support for Israel, and Israel will be compelled to go it alone and do what it can to secure a lasting peace for itself in the Middle East. On the other hand, if Mr. Trump wins, that would signal, again, based on his past behavior, very good conditions for Israel, and potentially not so bad conditions for Ukraine, simply because President Trump has indicated that he will increase oil production. Drill, baby, drill. He's doing it because he wants to lower inflationary costs for the American consumer, lower energy costs because that extends to other areas. And if he succeeds in doing that, along with Saudi Arabia increasing its oil production because they want greater oil share, regardless of the price, those twin forces will, with due respect for our previous guest, Mr. Banerjee, I believe it will have a very significant effect on Russia's ability to continue the war, and in conjunction with other factors such as the Ukrainians incorporating successfully new technological developments, new weaponry, in ways that we cannot really predict right now, because the Ukrainians have shown a very good trend for doing much more with what they are given than we expect. So they've been able to, such as being able to achieve a counteroffensive in the Kursk region. And we haven't heard much from the Kursk region, really, because I don't believe we're hearing glorious tales of the Russians reducing the Kursk salient or anything like that. No, we're not hearing glorious tales of victory on the Eastern Front.
They're waiting for North Koreans to.
Yeah, they're waiting for those well-fed North Korean troops to give the Russians a shot in the arm of a morale. No. That it more resembles to me what Nazi Germany did during World War II on the Eastern Front in 1942, when, in addition to the Romanians, whom they had at the start of the war, at the start of their invasion, bringing in the Hungarians and the Italians,
Yep.
because they could not man the entire Eastern Front and sustain an offensive on any one sector without their Hungarian and Italian allies filling in critical gaps in the line.
I'll tell you, my city of Odessa was lucky in a way that it was occupied by Romanians, not Germans or
right.
Americans.
So you got off easy.
We got absolutely, because they were peaceful people. They were trading, making a little bit of money here and there, so on. Not Germans for sure.
Yeah, you're really.
So
Count your blessings.
yeah, Jim, there I would like to ask you that there is a strong belief that Donald Trump, with all his positive virtues, he is, by his nature, his upbringing, his life experience, he is a very kind of a transactional oriented president. So,
That
would it
would
be a situation where he will take, okay, Ukraine, Russia, okay, so I need to make a peace. What's in it for me? Okay, both sides, you tell me what you're going to provide me with, so I will help you to reach peace. Is that work
if
something
you're
like that?
if you're Ukrainian, if you're the Ukrainians, you would tell Mr. Trump, we will provide you a better customer. We will help secure NATO for you. We can offer you to help secure NATO for you, to strengthen NATO so that you can withdraw American troops if you choose and place more emphasis on America first. You could offer that to the president, and they would be in a fairly strong bargaining position. Plus, you could also point out to the president that, from the Ukrainian perspective, we are developing our own military production capability. Other countries are helping us to develop our own military production capability, which will help us to defend ourselves better against the Russians. And if we can get some cooperation, if you go ahead and produce more energy, produce more oil and gas, lower the price of oil, and if the Saudis do the same, this will put a lot of pressure on Russia to make a deal. And to make a deal, maybe not the world's best deal for them, but any deal is better than none.
Well, Saudi, what I heard, delayed their process of increasing production for 1 month. So instead of the December 1st, it's going to start on January 1st, hopefully. And so that will bring the desired result. And or maybe they wanted to see what's happened with election. And
Yeah, I think they're taking a wait and see attitude. Yeah.
absolutely. So on Ukrainian front lines, it's the same thing. It's everybody's waiting for the outcome of the election. Interestingly enough, Russians are holding all kind of parties for possible Trump election, and in 2016 they had this. Unfortunately, he passed away, I think, this year, Mr. Zhirinovsky, who is a very
Yes.
powerful personage, and he was saying that our Trump is winning. Let's have a champagne for Mr. Trump, or so on. It worked quite well, and it was interesting in 2016. Nowadays, it's well, there is still a lot of Russian different propaganda. Even in the United States, they're still doing this job, but I don't think it will result in any outcome of the election. It's a nice try, but nothing more than that. What's your opinion about this Russian propaganda?
At this point, I think they're just whistling in the dark. They really have no more insight into American elections than the pollsters do. Right now, everyone in the United States although there are a number of analysts who are showing that the trends are favoring Trump overall, particularly the Electoral College. There are very few Russian analysts that I would say that would have a great deal of credibility in being able to analyze the American environment. The exception to that was Henry Trofimenko, who was with the Institute for the Study of the USA and Canada, based in Moscow. And I quoted him quite a bit in my book, The Russian View of U.S. Strategy. Why? Because his analyses were the exception to the general rule that Russian analysts, I noted, tend to mirror image. They tended to project their own thinking onto American strategic thinkers and policy planners, and assuming that Americans saw the situation the same way that the Russians would. And Trofimenko was an exception. He analyzed American strategy very accurately. And so eventually, when he came to the United States, he was staying with the Scots, who had been attachés to Moscow, and I heard from the Scots, they said that Henry wanted to meet me, and he wanted an autographed copy of my book, The Russian View of U.S., because I quoted him so much. Okay, so I met him, picked him up at the house, and I took him to J.R. Stockyards, which is one of the Washington D.C. area's best restaurants, steak restaurants particularly. I took him there, and I ordered for him a one of their signature dishes, their marinated steak,
Nice.
marinated sirloin steak. And Henry, he saw that, and he was cutting into it, and he took a bite, and he says, Jonathan, never in my life have I tasted such a delicious cut of meat.
Hmm.
And I said, well, I wanted to do something nice for you.
Beautiful.
Yeah. So but I had respect for him as being a very accurate and professional analyst, and I wrote in my inscription to him in the book. It says to probably the best Russian analyst of U.S. strategy in the former Soviet Union. Too bad they didn't listen to you.
Yeah. Yeah, well, there are a lot of very interesting discussions in YouTube. You can find, for example, one was a lecture by John Mearsheimer on U.S. politics, and
Oh
another
yeah,
one
he
was,
was. He, at one point, he was the one saying, "Let's give everyone nuclear weapons." What?
yeah,
Are you insane? Well, I don't believe Mearsheimer recognized the growing potential of ballistic missile defense to actually one day effectively neutralize nuclear weapons as weapons of war. As I've advocated, if the United States chooses to do so, the components are all there.
yeah,
The space station, all the components are there, just as all
technology is there.
the technology is there. It simply needs to be integrated and led with the proper political will. And President Trump would be the one most likely to do it, because after all, he was the one who created the Space Force, and because he instinctively saw the value of being able to control space. Now, he obviously had not thought through all the implications of that, but creating the worldwide strategic defense matrix, wisdom, would be something that he would likely be very willing to support, because again, it protects the United States first and foremost, but by extension, it has the potential to neutralize the nuclear arsenals of our adversaries in what would be a principal feature of what I call the strategy of asymmetric response. Do not react to your opponent in the way that your opponent expects. In a way, it's kind of like a good chess move. The way any good chess player uses a strategy of asymmetric response. You don't respond move for move exactly the way your opponent moves. You move instead in a way that your opponent is either unprepared for, or or does not expect. And that's one of the hallmarks of a good chess player, being able to use asymmetric response to his advantage, or her advantage in some cases.
Yeah, there is a interesting theory about U.S. by winning the Cold War, and now there is a new terminology, Cold War One, because it implies that Cold War Two is happening right now, or some sort of. Or what is?
Actually, I would tend to respond to that by responding the way Mark Twain once responded. He said, "History doesn't repeat itself. It does rhyme, though."
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good one. So when the West, and of course, United States won the Cold War. Okay, let's put it this way, at least for sure. And it seems to me, and I think Fukuyama wrote his famous book in 1992, shortly after
Fukuyama, that's right. The end of history.
the end of history in 1992, and Soviet Union ceased to exist in 1991. So the timing was perfect, and it would be very difficult at the time to argue to his position that from now on there's no more history, because everything is now sort of concluded in its interesting ways. But that's what we have now. It's beauty. It's forever. And
And and Henry, and in my book, in the introduction to it, I quoted Henry Kissinger at the time, who warned against that sort of attitude. That sooner or later, Russia, even though it seems to be helpless now, would sooner or later reassert itself because of the great mass of its territory and the resources at its command, would eventually recover and once again begin trying to reassert itself in the European theater. And Kissinger proved correct. That it was too soon for us to claim that this is the end of history. I mean, in retrospect, it's a very Fukuyama looks very foolish in making that declaration and being too sanguine, given the history of human nature and human behavior over the thousands of years of recorded human history. Why would you possibly expect that the lion is going to now lie down with a lamb, and we are all going to be singing peaceful songs for the rest of the time, for the rest of human history? That's just a fatuous argument. It is too naive.
Jonathan, you know what? Thinking about our friend Banerjee, I
Oh,
think
yes.
he belongs to somewhat old European school of geopolitics, where they see Soviet Union and then Russia as a great adversary, and we have to somehow learn how to deal with them and so on. All the other republics, including Ukraine, they were not taken seriously at all. It was like, okay, so it's former Soviet Union, okay, so now Russia. It doesn't matter really what Russia or Soviet Union is about the same thing. And they never really taken seriously separate history, economics of each country, specifically Ukraine as by far the most important country of the former Soviet Union beside Russia. So it's the same thing. Okay, if you are learning history and geography of United States, would you spend a lot of time to learn about history of Nebraska, maybe, or South Dakota? Probably not. They are great states, but not as important in a overall picture.
Yeah,
There's nothing.
the seminal event that you would study in American history, you would study the American Civil War.
Absolutely.
And because, as was pointed out in a television special on the Civil War developed by Ken Burns, near the conclusion of it, one of the principal narrators stated that about the importance of the American Civil War was that before the American Civil War, we would say the United States are. We stated that because we regard ourselves as a collection of independent states.
Yes.
Typically, someone from Virginia would say, I am a Virginian. He would not say, I am an American. Just as a Nebraska, someone from
there was no nation at that time.
We did not think of ourselves as a unified nation.
Yeah.
After the American Civil War, the narrator said, we said, the United States is. That's what the Civil War did for us. It made us and is.
Right. Same thing as Ukraine, the Maidan of 1913-14 and subsequent events made a new Ukrainian nation that, unfortunately, from 1991, when it became independent, it squandered its future, its economics, its everything was absolutely, because I remember at that time I was very often in Poland, and I saw the development of Poland when they had shock therapy, and then a few years later, after that, they joined the European Union and then NATO, and it became a European country by all means, 100%. And that could happen in Ukraine. Unfortunately, West, as much as they helped Poland to go through all this, and they guided in helping Poland all the way, they neglected Ukraine completely. They were very much involved in Russia. They sent so-called Chicago boys to run the Russian so-called economy. In the meantime, they made themselves very rich by doing so. And so this is neither here nor there, but Ukraine was not being given any attention at all. And now, already so many years later, Ukraine and many people, even the same John Mersheimer, he's not prepared to treat Ukraine as independent nation. He's not saying that, I must admit, but he still treated it as a part of old Soviet Union, and therefore, since Russia incorporated all Soviet Union and all its assets and everything else, so why not Ukraine? Ukraine is an asset of the old Soviet Union, so it should be automatically an asset of Russia. So how all this rebellion and so on, it has to be clamped down and immediately dealt with.
And Mearsheimer conveniently overlooks the fact that when the former Soviet forces came back into Ukraine during the Second World War, remember when the Germans first invaded Ukraine in 1941, the Ukrainians greeted the Germans as liberators. They were willing to form a separate Ukrainian nation and ally with the Nazis against the former Soviet regime. And unfortunately, being incredibly short-sighted as they were, based on their Nazi ideology, they managed to do the almost impossible: convince the Ukrainians that the Nazis were just as bad as the Russians, and they were fighting against both sides. So, and eventually overlooks the fact that when the Russian troops came back into Ukraine in the offensives of 1944, that the Vlasov's Army of the Damned fought just as hard against the Russian invaders as they had against the Nazis. So he overlooks all of this and overlooks the fact that Ukraine simply views itself as a separate national entity. They do not view themselves as Russians or as part of the great Russian Empire. They reject that completely. And even if in the what I consider the unlikely event that Russia were to emerge victorious in its war against Ukraine, which I don't believe they have either the resources, the skill, the manpower, or anything else, that factors are what the Soviets used to call the correlation of forces is moving against the Russian Empire, not in its favor. So right now, it's a fascinating situation, but it's one that, again, on this one of these most crucial days in American history, if not global history, this is one of these things where we await the outcome, and I still contend that the Ukrainians still hold their destiny very much in their own hands. If they are able, against current expectations, if they are able to throw yet another counteroffensive punch, a well-timed one, before the onset of winter, and if they can do so in a manner which cuts off, for example, as suggested by the article, cuts off Crimea from Russian control and enables Crimea to come back under Ukrainian control, that will be a decisive victory for the Ukrainian people.
Yeah, I agree with you, Jonathan. It's very symptomatic to see what's happened in the next, not few days, few hours.
Yeah, it's going to be that exciting tonight. My wife and I are going to go out after the conclusion of this program. We're going to fulfill our duty as American citizens, and we are going to vote.
Yes.
And then we are going to vote our conscience.
Don't tell us whom you're going to vote.
No. We are going to vote our conscience. That is the safest thing to say. We're going to we look at the situation and we vote our conscience and fulfill our duties as American citizens. And then after that, I will take my wife out to one of our favorite local restaurants, and we shall have a lovely brunch or dinner, depending on what time of day you want to, what time of day we finish. And then we settle down this evening, pull out the big bowl of popcorn. Okay, let's watch these exciting election returns. Actually, I will probably watch the exciting election returns. My wife will probably go take an early nap.
Jonathan, how much you trust your wife?
Oh, implicit. I trust my wife 100%. We've been married for nearly 36 years.
Okay, I'm sorry to ask this question, but there were rumors that actually the Republican wives that they
Oh,
should vote for the same as their husbands, but in secretly they
all
may
right,
just vote for Democrats.
right.
You
Now,
got that?
no. That's an element of propaganda that's put out by the other side. Say, oh, really? Your husbands are really your wives are really going to go vote Democrat. I said, no, not if they've been married that long. That just doesn't happen. They may themselves be in fact be mirror imaging their own situation. Their own spouses may in fact be voting for the other side. So so
Funny.
yeah, it'd be so that's not something I would bank on as a reliable thing, but it's a fascinating situation no matter how you look at it, and it's nearly unprecedented. Nearly unprecedented in American history. Although you can look at other very divisive and very close American elections, and if you want the most recent one of consequence, I would say it would be 1968. Remember, that was when Richard Nixon, the Republican, was running against Hubert Humphrey, the Democrat, who had taken over because Lyndon Johnson was the incumbent president, but he regarded himself as politically toxic because of the Vietnam War, and
Yeah.
he could. Even though, by the way, I ran a historical computer simulation of that same 1968 election, and I discovered that Lyndon Johnson could have won as the incumbent president, albeit just barely, preventing Richard Nixon from taking over. Although I also ran the simulation where I took control of George Wallace's campaign. He was the third party independent party candidate. As you recall, in 1968, George Wallace actually won five southern states of what I call the Old Confederacy,
Hmm.
45 electoral votes, and enabling Richard Nixon got 301 electoral votes. But surrounding that cluster of five old Confederate states, Wallace ran so strongly in the other southern states that with a better run, he had a better than even chance of taking enough electoral votes away to throw the entire election into the House of Representatives. At that time, if the election had been thrown into the House of Representatives, the Democrats had enough delegations to elect Hubert Humphrey the president if Wallace had succeeded in throwing the election into the House of Representatives. So, yes, very consequential elections are not without precedent in American history. The accuracy or the credibility of what I call the checks and balances system in the United States, it is being put to one of its strongest tests yet. Yeah, this is going to be, because you can have, based on what the polls and other experts are telling us, you could have everything from the Republicans actually have a decent chance at winning not only the presidency, but control of the Senate and control of the House, which would give
Yes.
them unified control and would give a reelected President Trump a very powerful hand in being able to conduct his foreign policy and his domestic objectives for the next 4 years. So that is very possible. Much less likely is considered a Democratic sweep, where they get both the Senate and the House and the presidency, considered to be much less of a probability. And if you look at the middle, where say is also plausible, you have the Republicans taking the Senate, the Democrats taking the House, basically switching, and
Yeah.
no matter who wins the presidency at that point, they are facing a divided government for the next 4 years. So it would be again a fascinating set of potential developments, but all of which will have its own unique effect on the war in Ukraine.
I totally agree with you, Jonathan, and I'm looking forward to today's day as it starts to develop. And the first,
Friday is going to be really fun.
oh yeah, by Friday we will know the
Oh
name of
yeah, it should be starting to the smoke should be clearing by then, and
it.
people will be getting over their post election hangovers and starting to sober up.
I think tomorrow, by the end of the day, we will know 100% who is
Yeah.
who and what is what exactly. In the meantime, Jonathan, thank you so much for today's program, and I'm looking forward to see you on Friday, same place, same time, and all the best to our listeners. Try to survive today's day, and glory to Ukraine. Thank you very much, everybody. Bye bye.